Nathalie Simper, and this is The Limitless Musician, a podcast by KE Creative. Our team helps modern musicians find modern solutions to building a sustainable music career. Along with my co-host, Dr. Catherine Eminent, we will help you learn what it takes to build a career that enhances your life instead of restricting it by becoming the limitless musician you are meant to be. Hey friend, if you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome to The Limitless Musician. I'm Nathalie, and my co-host Catherine isn't joining today, but she will be joining in a couple of episodes down the line. She is the founder of KE Creative, and Limitless Musician is a branch of KE Creative. The goal and the mission of KE Creative is to support and provide resources for classical musicians who do it all and who have to engineer your own unique path as a career musician. And let's face it, if you're a musician, you have to hustle, you work hard, and you have to be pretty creative in order to build the career that you have and work towards the career that you want down the line. And she coined this term musicianeer, classical musicianeer, to describe musicians like you who engineer their paths. And since Limitless Musician is all about breaking down barriers, I figured we could marry the two terms into limitless musicianeer as someone who engineers their own music career and breaks down their own limits to create a sustainable music career. So I'm hoping that this episode today will help you and inspire you to embrace your inner limitless musicianeer. Originally, I had other plans for this episode. As the organizational queen of KE Creative, I already had this season's episodes outlined down to who was going to be on which episode and what topics we were going to be discussing. But as much of a planner as I am reminded over and over again that being open to what's going on in the moment can be better than what I've originally planned out for myself. And that is totally on theme for today's topic. If you follow the Limitless Musician on Instagram, then you know that some of my recent posts have been centered on things to unlearn as a musical perfectionist. The first time I posted about that a few weeks ago, it kind of blew up. And I was surprised at how many musicians shared and messaged me about how relatable those posts were. But, honestly, thinking back, I wasn't too surprised because there are so many musicians that feel an enormous amount of pressure to be perfect all the time, and then are so relieved to know that they're not alone in feeling that way. So I turned it into its own little series, and I thought that today would be a good opportunity to tie all of those posts together and to go a little bit deeper into the root of what those posts were talking about and going after. So today's episode is going to be about perfectionism in the classical music industry and how to evolve in order to break down the barriers that you have built for yourself in the pursuit of perfection. I think I was just naturally destined to be a perfectionist. My mom was a single parent and she did not mess around when it came to getting things done. She didn't have time to make mistakes and try again and repeat the cycle. So I was raised in the mindset that if you're going to do something, you better do it right the first time or don't bother doing it at all. So when I started taking piano and flute lessons, I had to really buckle down and take it seriously. And then as a musician, every band director, orchestra conductor, and professor I ever had in school and in lessons made it very clear that I had to perform at my best 100% of the time because that's what was going to be expected of me once I got into the real world as a career musician. And now, as a career coach, I see those same mindsets in the musicians who work with me and with Catherine. When we meet with new clients and ask them why they want a coach to help build their private studio or to build a career, a common reply is, "I'm afraid of doing things the wrong way." Which then begs the question, well, what is the right way to build a private studio or to become a college professor or an orchestral musician or any other career and path in classical music for that matter? There are so many quote unquote truths established by beliefs of success that have gone unchallenged for a really long time. And a few of those that came to mind are: one, practice makes perfect. Two, you have to attend the right music festivals or win X number of competitions in order to guarantee a successful career. And three, you have to exclusively perform in order to be considered a real musician. But if you start asking questions, then you start to see these quote unquote truths for what they really are: expectations that can't really hold up on their own once you start poking holes in the logic. Because if practice made perfect, then wouldn't there be a finite formula to calculate how many hours of practice you would need in order to reach perfection? And if attending the right festivals or winning the right number of competitions made your career a slam dunk, then wouldn't that mean that every person who did this would have an ironclad knockout music career? And finally, if being a performer exclusively makes you a real musician, then does that mean that music teachers, composers, conductors, and every other music professional are not real musicians? Perfectionism is a mindset that is so pervasive in classical musicians. And if you're not sure how embedded it is in our industry, think about the amount of music students and professionals who experience performance anxiety, playing related injuries, burnout, or who ultimately decide to leave the industry altogether. Think about recitals, concerts, semester juries, and any other setting where the spotlight has been on you and the pressure to deliver a flawless performance is on. You can't catch a deep breath, your knees start to shake, the butterflies in your stomach multiply like crazy. You push through that nagging shoulder pain, your vision starts to get blurry, and like all the other ways that that desire to be perfect affects your body and your mind in the moment. I don't know about you, but as I was talking about that, like my heart rate started to speed up a little bit. And I was starting to feel like that little tingling sensation of your blood pressure rising. It sent me back to thinking about my grad school days where I had totally become this like little music robot. By my second semester of grad school, I had every single minute of my day planned down to the meals and the bathroom breaks. And if something threw me out of that routine, it totally felt like a truck was coming towards me head on without any kind of a chance of escape. I spent every free moment outside of classes and rehearsals in the practice room. That was literally my life, like rinse and repeat for my 3 semesters of grad school. One moment that I can still picture as if it were yesterday was this conversation with a fellow graduate teaching assistant. He made a random comment along the lines of, like, wow, it's so rare to see you outside of the practice room. Every time I'm looking for an empty practice room, you're always in one of those rooms. And even though it was just like a simple throwaway comment that didn't really mean anything, it still today, like years later, sticks with me. Because when I think about that, I think of all the things that I was willing to sacrifice outside of music for the chance to become a perfect performer. I was sacrificing my social life and my personal life and also my personal well being because I was so burned out in grad school. There is a psychological term known as psychological inflexibility. It's a habit or a tendency to stick to rigid patterns of behavior and thinking, even when it's proven that those patterns are no longer helpful or useful. And I was totally in that inflexible, rigid mindset when I was in grad school. I had that set formula of how I needed to do things, and nothing was going to stop me from carrying that routine out. And if I did deviate from that routine, then it would really throw me off my game. And it made me really stressed and anxious. A relatable example for many musicians is practicing the same way over and over and over and over again. But your performance anxiety doesn't get any better, it gets worse. And you continue to make the same mistakes you were trying to get rid of in the practice room in the first place. Remember the saying that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? Well, I can see a lot of ways in which this manifests for classical musicians because the industry as a whole is trying to stick to doing things in a way that has been proven to be ineffective or even harmful to musicians on an emotional and a mental level. So, why are classical musicians so bent on repeating the same methods as the musicians that came before us? Those methods that lead to burnout, performance anxiety, playing related injuries, and the overwhelming feeling of never being good enough to have a successful career. Now, I'm not saying that every single musician in the history of time has experienced all of these things, but enough musicians experience it that we need to allow space to talk about the toll it takes on you as a human being, as well as how it serves as a catalyst for people who choose to walk away from classical music altogether as a career. When I was reading into the psychology behind all of this, I saw an explanation of psychological inflexibility as a mental prison that you build for yourself. And I think that's a really appropriate way to describe the effects of needing to be a perfect musician all the time. In every stage of your musical training and professional life, you've been taught to view musicianship as black and white. You have to play 100% perfectly. Or if you even make one mistake, well, you might as well have gotten everything wrong because you can't use that recording anymore. If you aren't winning orchestral auditions or landing college professorship interviews, then you have to keep auditioning and you have to keep applying because only the serious musicians get those jobs. And if you're listening, not watching this episode, I totally did air quotes for serious. The reality is that in addition to the black and white of the world, in between, there are so many shades of gray that are left on the table when you are mentally too rigid and too stuck in your ways. If every human being was created exactly the same, with the same strengths, weaknesses, interests, dislikes, talents, work ethic, well, then maybe psychological inflexibility could be the way and perfectionism could be attainable. But you're not a robot created in the design of all the other robots before you. You have your own set of skills, strengths, shortcomings, and personal challenges that may overlap with other people's, but you're not going to find someone who experiences the world 100% exactly the way that you do. So if you've been trying to fit yourself into the career path and musicianship of somebody else with different likes, interests, strengths, weaknesses, challenges, and successes, then you've been slowly building up the walls to your mental prison and nurturing the limits that you're trying so hard to overcome. And you're probably sitting there thinking, like, I have tried to change. I have tried to do things a different way, but I just can't see how to do it, or I'm afraid of failing or getting it wrong. Well, then that's totally normal. There are so many people who allow the fear of failing to overwhelm your desire to do things differently because it kind of feels like a hopeless cause. But if you're wondering if it's even worth it to do the work to break down those barriers, the answer is absolutely, without a doubt, yes. You have the right to feel satisfied with yourself on a personal and a professional level. You can choose to spend time tearing down the mental walls and instead nurture a more open way of thinking. Just because many musicians before you have struggled to achieve their career dreams, it doesn't mean that you can't learn from their mistakes and work smarter, not harder, to build a sustainable career for you and your lifestyle. Unlearning perfectionistic ways of thinking means that you're taking care of more than just the musician side of your identity. You're taking care of yourself as a whole human being. So, we're hitting that part of the episode where I'm going to tell you that everything's going to be all right, everything's fine. And just because you are struggling with that perfectionistic mindset or struggling to see how you can change, it doesn't mean that you're incapable of learning how to do things differently. And if you were here in the studio, I'm sure Teef over here on the couch would be able to offer some cuddles and loves to make it feel like, the world is just a little bit more right again. But the bottom line here is that your brain is capable of learning, relearning, and unlearning the things that you practice. And as a limitless musicianeer who does it all, you know that better than you may realize. So now that we've talked about the ways perfectionism and mental inflexibility hold you back and have created some of those obstacles you've been working really hard to break down, let's talk about the polar opposite mindset, which is psychological flexibility. And this is the mindset that we have to thank for the longevity of human existence. Because psychological flexibility is the ability to adapt your thoughts and behaviors to fit your survival needs. When you're presented with a problem that you've never experienced before, your mind takes everything in from different perspectives and is able to come up with a solution. Now, you may not always get the right solution the first time, but your mind is capable of bending as much as you allow it to in order to find that sweet spot for you where you have a solution that is sustainable and that helps you feeling satisfied, fulfilled, and successful. The term sweet spot is something that I use all the time with my private flute students. It's my term for the embouchure that's going to give them the best possible tone production, the right placement, the right amount of structure in the embouchure. When a student is having tone quality issues, the pattern I see is that they try the same embouchure over and over again without changing anything. And the more they try, the more frustrated they get and the worse their tone gets. So when they start going into that little spiral, I tell them to stop and observe. I ask them, what's the problem? And they're going to say, well, my tone is bad. What's bad about it? It's all crusty and I keep cracking the note. Okay, well, then why is that bad? Or how is it bad? And it takes a little while sometimes, but eventually they might say something like, well, my lips are really pinchy and they're really tight. Great. Now that you know what's making it bad, can you think about what makes your tone good? And then my student will check their standing position, they'll relax their shoulders, they'll thoughtfully pull the instrument up to their face, they'll take a comfortable breath, and then play. And boom, 9 times out of 10, they're able to find their sweet spot without me having to put the flute in the right place for them or to explain all the technicalities behind where their sweet spot might be. The same method that I use to help my students find their sweet spot for their embouchure can be adjusted and applicable to help you find the sweet spot in your music career. That sweet spot where you're working purposefully and you're getting results that energize you, satisfy your ambitions, they're helping you earn a livable wage and help you thrive as a musician and as a human being. So if you're constantly stressed or overwhelmed with the need to be perfect, then take a step back and go through these steps to unlearn that drive for perfectionism and practice something new. Step 1, stop and observe. What's the problem? Step 2, what's bad about the problem that you have? Step 3, okay, how is that making your problem worse? Step 4, great. Now that you understand what's causing the problem, can you think of what can make your problem better or solve it completely? Step 5, put yourself in position, take a comfortable breath, and act on your solution, even if you're unsure of the outcome. You won't be successful 100% of the time because you're not a fortune teller who can predict how everything is going to play out 100% of the time. And I've also just kind of spent this entire episode talking about how aiming to be perfect all the time isn't the best thing for you. But if you can learn from your mistakes as well as you do from when you're succeeding and you get things right, then you're going to be learning in so many more of your experiences instead of just during the times that you got it right the first time. And that's what this is all about. Being adaptable and flexible to doing things differently than you were taught to do as a perfectionist means weakening those walls of your mental prison, taking what works and leaving what doesn't, and opening your mind to new ideas and ways of moving your career forward. So let's pull some of those nuggets for you to think about and take away from this episode. First, perfectionism is a mindset that goes hand in hand with mental inflexibility. The more you try to stick to a black and white way of thinking, the more anxiety and stress you'll experience. Second, striving for perfection creates a prison in your mind with walls that are the very obstacles or limits you are working so hard to overcome. But just as those walls can be built, they can also be broken down. Third, your career isn't black and white. You can embrace the gray in your strengths, weaknesses, and everything in between because as a human being, you are born to adapt to your environment. Finally, you can choose to be psychologically flexible in order to break through your limits and nurture a healthy career mindset. When you hit a wall, follow the 5 steps to find your sweet spot and learn from the outcome, even if it's not a success. Unlearning how to be a perfectionist musician doesn't have to be one of the walls in your mental prison. With small and simple steps, you can practice to be more flexible, versatile, and intuitive to find your unique solutions to the problems that you face every day as a limitless musicianeer. And remember, the more you practice, the better you get. Before I officially wrap up this episode, I just want to share a sneak peek of what's to come in the next couple of episodes of the podcast. First off, Catherine, my co-host, will be returning in the next episode. It's been a little while since she's been on, so I'm really excited to share the episode with her. And we are going to be talking all about burnout, which I know a lot of musicians are all too familiar with. So it's going to be a really great episode. And then after that episode, there's going to be a big surprise and something brand new for this podcast, which I really can't wait to share with you all. It's really exciting, but I just want to keep the surprise to myself a little bit longer. So keep an ear out for that announcement on Instagram. You're going to get a new episode from us every 2 weeks on Wednesday. So go ahead and set a reminder, mark your calendar, or set up a notification on whatever platform you're listening on or watching from so that you don't miss out. That's all for today's episode on The Limitless Musician. If you liked this episode, follow us on Instagram at The Limitless Musician to tell us what you want to hear next. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive content that won't show up anywhere else by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time.